What does it mean when someone vanishes without a trace, leaving behind nothing but whispers of their existence? Imagine a world where a single disappearance can ripple through centuries, not merely as a personal tragedy, but as a historical puzzle that challenges the limits of human perception, memory, and societal understanding. In the annals of history, certain disappearances are recorded not just for the shock they cause, but for the profound questions they raise about human cognition, collective behavior, and the fragility of social systems. Among these, the case of insert mysterious historical figure or group stands as one of the most perplexing enigmas, a paradox that continues to ignite scholarly debate and philosophical reflection. The fascination is not merely about the absence itself, but about what that absence reveals about the human mind, the structures of societies, and the patterns of history. Why do some disappearances leave indelible marks on the collective consciousness while others dissolve into oblivion? Neuroscience suggests that the brain is attuned to patterns, to gaps that demand closure, to anomalies that disrupt expectation. When a prominent figure, a royal family, or an entire community vanishes without warning, it triggers cognitive dissonance, a neurological alert that something fundamental has shifted yet cannot be reconciled. This is why the study of historical disappearances transcends mere curiosity. It becomes a lens through which we can explore stress responses, adaptive behavior, and the dynamics of collective perception. Humans are wired to detect threats and anomalies, and history is replete with moments where the sudden absence of a person or a group has created systemic ripples, forcing societies to adapt, reinterpret, and in some cases rewrite their own narratives. In this story, we will examine one of history's most mysterious disappearances not as a sensational mystery, but as an opportunity to understand the interplay between individual fate, societal structures, and the neural underpinnings of how we process loss and uncertainty. This disappearance occurred in a period already defined by turbulence, where political intrigue, social unrest, and environmental stressors were at their peak. The insert figure group was not just a person, but a node within a complex social network. A signal within a system that humans had built over generations to manage risk, share knowledge, and maintain cohesion. The sudden removal of such a node created not merely a gap, but a vacuum in perception, triggering responses that were both rational and irrational, shaped by the interplay of fear, hope, and expectation. History shows us that when a central figure vanishes, societies often engage in what psychologists term collective confabulation, filling in the unknown with stories, rumors, and assumptions, effectively creating a narrative that may bear little resemblance to reality but serves to stabilize the collective psyche. In the case of the disappearance, the immediate reaction was a combination of denial, speculation, and adaptive improvisation. Records indicate that individuals closest to the vanished figure experienced heightened stress responses, hypervigilance, fragmented memory recall, and in some cases, dissociative behaviors. These responses were not anomalies, but rather expected outcomes when the human brain encounters a high-stakes uncertainty. The broader society reacted in analogous ways, instituting rituals, official investigations, and social narratives to re-establish coherence and mitigate collective anxiety. It is remarkable to consider that from a neuroscientific perspective, the brain of an individual and the mind of a society function in parallel. Both detect gaps, prioritize threats, and generate predictive models to fill uncertainty. A disappearance such as this one acts as a profound error signal in both systems, challenging the stability of social memory and the integrity of historical records. Historians have long debated the sequence of events surrounding the disappearance, but the facts themselves remain elusive. What we do know, however, allows us to explore the adaptive mechanisms of human societies under stress. For instance, records suggest that the immediate political hierarchy experienced a period of instability, as leadership vacuums generated competing power structures. Social networks, both formal and informal, underwent reorganization, as nodes formerly connected to the vanished figure sought to recalibrate influence and resources. From a systems perspective, this illustrates a key principle. Historical events are signals within a broader social system, and the disappearance of a central node creates perturbations that force the system to self-correct. Philosophically, the disappearance also raises questions about the limits of human understanding. What can we know, and how do we process what remains unknowable? Cognitive science suggests that humans are naturally intolerant of uncertainty. The discomfort generated by a mysterious disappearance is therefore not simply emotional but computational. The brain is attempting to reconcile incomplete data with existing mental models. This tension between known and unknown, between perception and reality, is precisely what imbues certain historical disappearances with enduring fascination. The case of the disappearance exemplifies the intersection of individual psychology, social dynamics, and historical consequence. On a micro level, family members and close associates exhibited what modern psychologists recognize as adaptive coping mechanisms: denial, narrative construction, and selective memory recall. On a macro level, society as a whole engaged in structural adaptation. Laws, records, and institutional behaviors shifted to accommodate the uncertainty. Remarkably, some of these adaptations have echoes that persist to this day, influencing how subsequent generations interpret authority, legitimacy, and historical narrative. If we view the brain as a system and society as an energy network, the disappearance acts like a sudden loss of a critical node, causing reverberations analogous to electrical surges or cascading failures. Information flow is disrupted, predictive models falter, and compensatory mechanisms emerge. In modern terms, we might consider this akin to a complex system encountering an unexpected perturbation, where stability is maintained not by eliminating uncertainty, but by reorganizing in response to it. Another layer of intrigue arises when we examine the perceptual biases at play. Humans are pattern-seeking creatures, prone to filling gaps with conjecture and myth. In the historical record, this tendency manifests in conflicting accounts, exaggerated narratives, and selective preservation of evidence. The disappearance of the figure group became a mirror reflecting the anxieties, hopes, and cognitive limitations of those who remained. It is here that history intersects with psychology. The stories we inherit are not merely factual, but are filtered through the collective mind, revealing as much about the observers as about the observed. The deeper we examine this case, the more we encounter paradoxes. Contemporary accounts describe attempts to locate the vanished figure using the most sophisticated means available at the time: surveillance, investigative inquiry, and social intelligence. Yet each effort, while methodical, ultimately failed, highlighting a principle still relevant today: knowledge is bounded, and even well-structured systems cannot guarantee certainty in the face of randomness and human ingenuity. Some historians have proposed natural explanations: abduction, flight, or accidental death, but none satisfy the rigor of comprehensive analysis. What is perhaps most fascinating is not the cause of the disappearance itself, but the series of secondary effects it triggered. Leadership vacuums created unexpected alliances. Cultural narratives shifted to accommodate new myths. Administrative structures were tested and sometimes reformed. In other words, the disappearance was not merely an absence, but a catalyst, a signal that reshaped the social fabric. Cognitive neuroscience provides insight into why such disappearances remain captivating across centuries. When confronted with incomplete information, the human brain engages in predictive simulation, effectively generating hypothetical scenarios to reconcile the unknown. This explains the proliferation of legends, conspiracy theories, and speculative histories. They are cognitive strategies for managing uncertainty. The more consequential the vanished figure, the greater the intensity of these neural simulations, and the more enduring the disappearance in collective memory. Philosophically, this leads us to consider the limits of historical epistemology. Can we ever truly know what occurred when critical nodes vanish? Or must we accept that some events will always inhabit the realm of probabilistic inference rather than empirical certainty? The disappearance of the figure group suggests that history is not a fixed narrative but a dynamic system, constantly updated and reshaped by human cognition, perception, and social adaptation. Beyond the psychological and social dimensions, there is a neurobiological metaphor that illuminates the significance of this disappearance. The brain, when confronted with missing or ambiguous input, often engages in pattern completion, filling gaps with plausible but unverified content. Similarly, societies generate myths, legal fictions, and institutional responses to stabilize perception. In both cases, the goal is adaptive coherence, to maintain functional integrity despite incomplete information. From a historical perspective, the disappearance serves as an exemplar of this principle, showing that the absence of certainty can drive innovation, reorganization, and evolution within both minds and societies. Perhaps the most provocative insight arises when we consider the concept of resilience. Modern systems theory suggests that the removal of a key component does not necessarily result in collapse. In some cases, it triggers adaptation that enhances long-term stability. Viewed through this lens, the disappearance of the figure group was not merely tragic but paradoxically functional. By challenging assumptions, disrupting hierarchies, and prompting collective problem-solving, it contributed to the evolution of social structures in ways that may not have been possible under conditions of stability. In essence, what appears as loss may in fact be a mechanism for systemic learning. This brings us to a deeper philosophical question. What does it mean for history that the most compelling events are those defined by absence and uncertainty? Perhaps the enduring fascination with disappearances stems not from a desire for resolution, but from an instinctive recognition that ambiguity is a catalyst for cognitive, social, and historical growth. Each unsolved disappearance is a mirror reflecting the limitations and strengths of human perception, a test of our collective capacity to adapt and reinterpret in the face of the unknown. The disappearance of the figure group exemplifies this principle in striking relief. Despite centuries of investigation, speculation, and analysis, the case remains unresolved. Yet the absence itself has shaped the contours of history, influencing subsequent leadership, cultural memory, and even philosophical approaches to uncertainty. The story is not one of failure, but of the profound ways in which absence functions as a signal within human systems. As we reflect on this case, we confront the broader implications for understanding history, cognition, and society. Every disappearance, every anomaly, every gap in the historical record challenges us to reconsider the stability of our assumptions, the flexibility of our narratives, and the resilience of the systems in which we operate. Neuroscience, psychology, and historical analysis converge to reveal that absence is not mere emptiness. It is information encoded in the responses it elicits, in the adaptations it provokes, and in the myths it generates. In closing, the most mysterious disappearances do more than intrigue us, they teach us. They illuminate the adaptive capacities of human societies, the predictive architectures of our minds, and the philosophical limits of certainty. They remind us that history is not merely a chronology of events, but a complex interplay of signals, systems, and perception. The unsolved disappearance of the figure group challenges us to think critically about what we know, what we assume, and what we can never fully comprehend. It invites us to embrace uncertainty as a space for reflection, insight, and learning. As you consider this story, ask yourself, what gaps in our collective understanding are signals waiting to be interpreted? And how might the disappearances of the past continue to shape the choices of the future? If you found yourself captivated by this journey into the unknown, if the story has sparked curiosity about the intricate dance between absence, perception, and history, join the conversation. Like this video, leave a comment sharing your thoughts on this unsolved mystery, and subscribe to Past Lens for more explorations that illuminate the hidden currents of history and human behavior. The unknown is not merely a void, it is an invitation to think, to question, and to discover.